Llegó el momento de una nueva conferencia, en este caso en inglés, desde los Estados Unidos, con Sofía López, fundadora y directora de operaciones de Kaleido, The States of Enterprise Blockchain Adoption, founder and chief operating officer of Kaleido. She is Sofía López, an award-winning digital transformation platform and a leading global blockchain as a service. Kaleido has been called the killer app for the enterprise blockchain. Its clients include the top third of the world's largest banks and 80% of the world's supply chain leaders, with 1,000 of enterprise blockchain networks running globally on its platform. Sofia has an engineering undergraduate degree from Harvard University and an MBA from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And we have here one of the organization's team, Nacho. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome, Sofia.
Hi, Sophia. How are you? Very welcome to our Blockchain Summit Global. And I want to thank you to all your support and all that you can share on this event. All the use cases that Kaleido have for this is Kaleido is one of the most innovative company in the blockchain field. So we are very proud and honored that you could join us. So thank you so much.
No, muchas gracias y me da mucho placer estar con ustedes y por la introducción, Ignacio. Voy a hacer la plática en inglés, pero solo y pues si cualquier persona prefiere platicar después en español, con mucho gusto lo atendemos, y tenemos ingenieros también que pues son de Argentina y de México y de Colombia y en otros lados. Entonces, yo viví en Guatemala 4 años y en México 2 años, entonces mi corazón está con ustedes en Latinoamérica. Algún día regreso con ustedes, pero por ahora estoy en los Estados Unidos.
Qué
Y
bueno.
primero voy a introducir un poco quién soy yo y quién es Kaleido, y luego cuáles son las cosas que detrás de todo, pues casi una década de blockchain que hemos aprendido, y luego, como dijo Ignacio, voy a platicar de lo que están haciendo los clientes, compañías, empresas globales y gobiernos con blockchain. Y ahora voy a cambiar en inglés.
Gracias, Sofía.
I'm going to start talking about the state of enterprise adoption. And as I mentioned, I'm going to introduce myself in Kaleido quickly first, and then go into, sorry, I went too quickly. I know there's something going on with my slides here. Hold on, apologies. All right. So very nice to meet you. So I'm one of the founders of Kaleido. Prior to Kaleido, I worked at IBM. Prior to blockchain, worked with very large enterprise systems, had a $3 billion profit and loss responsibility for very large enterprise systems portfolios. Then was the executive owner of the IBM blockchain platform business, launched the world's first blockchain as a service, and 2 subsequent generations, worked with hundreds of clients, really saw some of the needs in the marketplace, and started Kaleido with someone else I had worked with in the past. And there's 4 of us as co-founders with deep experience in the intersection of blockchain, cloud, and enterprise tech. So from day one, we really felt very strongly that we need to get enterprises and governments, organizations into production quickly so they can get the business benefits. So that means making blockchain radically simple for enterprise and bringing these networks together. We have, just to explain a little bit about Kaleido, we have a free tier. So students, developers, companies, you can try this out for free, and you'll get in and you'll see the types of dashboards and tools and analytics you need to get started. There's lots of services and things you need besides just blockchain node as a service. I'll talk more about that. And if you want to run across clouds, on-prem, and run lots of different options around open source, depending on your use case, we bring those all together for you in one place. And the result is you could build 3 times faster, reduce cost significantly, and then run it much easier too. So that's who I am and who Kaleido is. In terms of some of the lessons and where enterprise adoption is today, if you look at what just happened to the whole world the last year and a half, we all together responded to the COVID threat and the pandemic. And I think for a lot of businesses, it really became very clear that digital transformation needs to happen now because people were working remotely from home. You can't do things manually or paper-based from an office if you can't go to the office. So we see, for example, the insurance industry, as Ignacio mentioned, they told us their roadmap has accelerated by a decade. And this Riskstream collaborative that I mentioned here, they're actually part of a 100-year-old insurance institute that has 24 different working groups and use cases around 24 different ways that blockchain can help digitally transform and accelerate business outcomes they want to get to. And I'll talk about two of those that are in production and where clients are involved with today towards the second half of the presentation. So I think digital transformation really is going to be the theme of this decade going forward. If you look at all of the issues we ran into COVID, that's a very good illustration of issues when you have a lack of transparency and trust around shared data. So just the time it takes, the risks, the inefficiencies, and fraud and disputes. There's two trends I wanted to mention in terms of the state of enterprise adoption for blockchain. One is that digital transformation has moved from the front office, which is just improving mobile apps and things on the front end on the web, and pushing all the way back to the back office, where you have these large systems, or in some cases, systems that were still manual and paper-based. So now all of that is being touched and affected by digital transformation. The second trend we're seeing, and this is actually a chart from McKinsey, is that the ecosystem economy is here. Companies are looking to work together as a business network, and they're bringing their relationships to work together. And we've been seeing that already in different parts of the world. For example, if you look like companies such as Alibaba, and the way they span many different parts of the business. And now for a company, the health of that company is dependent on the health of the relationships and the sort of products and services the network they belong to can launch. But there are challenges we see when you're bringing new ecosystems together. There's technical challenges. There's a lot of new skills required for blockchain. There's the IT and process of looking at a single copy of data and managing all the tools and workflow across multiple parties and really sharing, doing IT together. And then the business and governance challenges. So we really need to look at industry, legal, and process expertise. And there's already a lot of legal firms and different people who can help on the business side or consultants. You need enterprise and core systems, companies' existing systems and sources of data, and combining that with leadership and the cutting edge technology across cloud, privacy, things like zero knowledge proofs, and blockchain. So how exactly does blockchain help? And probably people have seen this in the whole last 2 days, but it's really putting all the companies onto a shared ledger and using automated contracts to increase efficiency and getting to that single source of truth. So I think the second point, so the first one was digital transformation is the theme of the decade. The second important point is business networks need much more than a blockchain. So blockchain is a very small percentage of the technology stack needed by digital business networks. So we look at blockchain as the beating heart of the solution, but you require many other technologies. What we see is that a typical project uses over 40 components, and blockchain is about 5% of that. So you're looking at how can you accelerate building the applications in the middleware, and how do you work with the off-chain data and on-chain data to build these solutions together. So you have a whole stack of technologies from the data, you have the beating heart, which is the blockchain, transaction, middle, and app tiers, and you're also looking at the business, governance, and operations, as well as the DevOps. So I've included here, a representation of what a typical blockchain network can look like. So you see there's multiple members. There might be some private data exchange if two members of a trade finance network have a special pricing agreement, or there might be private data because it's healthcare and it's very highly regulated. So they have their own isolated data, but there's data broadcast across the whole network. There's a shared data and the assets on the ledger. And then we're using techniques like tokenization to represent digital assets. And then all of this needs to be connected to members' core systems. So as you can see, this is a complex endeavor. And if you're just looking at the blockchain open source code, you're missing all the complexity of what else is needed to bring these members together and get to business value. One thing I did want to mention is that there's Hyperledger is an umbrella organization under the Linux Foundation. And there's a new multi-party system open source technology called Firefly. And that's something that Kaleido has been very actively contributing all our years of expertise to with a number of our clients and partner networks. So I invite everyone in Latin America. I know Gabriel on our team, one of our distinguished engineers, did a workshop yesterday, but it's open source code. This can accelerate your projects by 2 or 3 years, and it's free. You can pick it up and start using it. So I encourage you to take a look at that, and it works with all the major protocols. So another trend I wanted to mention is that people don't want to just do POCs anymore, or proof of concepts for blockchain. There's a lot of pressure to get to the business results, the return on investment, the ROI, and the outcomes. So the question really is, how do you go from that POC to pilot to production, or just think about going into production and being very successful with that? And we saw the first generation of blockchain projects had some issues, in that it took 3 to 5 years, thousands of lines of code, and really tens of millions of dollars in some cases. So, and enterprises were looking for very unique characteristics around being secure, tamper-proof, auditable identity ownership, permissioned identities, and ownership of the workloads, control of apps and systems. So doing all of this as you move from a proof of concept to a pilot to production is something we thought about from day one, so that you build on one platform and you can move straight up on the same set of technology, and it's very extensible. And this is a way to really maximize reuse of the investment in the resources and of your results. So that's a really important aspect to look at as you're looking at the blockchain projects. So here's just some examples of logos worldwide. Ignacio and team had asked me to talk about use cases in more detail, so I'll be doing that in a minute. I did want to say we're very proud to be working with clients and partners and associates in Latin America, as well as in Spain. So we do see some exciting projects and looking to a lot more that aren't public yet and that we'd like to talk about going forward. So enterprises really do need to do this at enterprise grade. So ISO and SOC certification, high availability disaster recovery. And they need to do that so that it's easy for developers to use. In terms of achieving business benefits, there's the evolution of existing business processes, so making things better, faster, cheaper. And then there's also the revolution of doing things you can never do before with the way our existing business works. So whole new business models, building new platforms, the same way that Uber built a new platform and a new way of doing business around the taxi and shared ride industry. So various examples for disease surveillance, just shaving, a lot of time off of, 2/3 of the time of the project. For NFTs and working with Sony, Fox, Heineken, large retailers, just making it a lot easier to get members onboarded and get the campaign rates for marketing campaigns increased for marketing engagement, reducing steps of a process, and really looking at different ways to address commodity cost centers, things like the supply chain for grain and having competitors come together and do this together to drive that cost down, and then realizing that they can differentiate and use the money saved to serve their customers in a much better way. So, and I mentioned the easy button for blockchain for developers. So what does that mean? You have easy to use APIs in common standard formats like RESTful APIs that a regular application developer could use, and plug and play components. So I think some lessons learned, and I'll get into some use cases now and client examples, is that decentralizing is a journey. So for the proof of concept, it might be one company who starts, and then for the pilot, you have 6 companies who come together. And at that point, they might decentralize the ownership of the resources and who's running what. And then in production, now have the network fully decentralized. So you have different steps along the way. For enterprise, decentralization really refers to, who owns the keys and who's signing, and having that diversity of signatures coming into making decisions as a collective network. The governance can often be the hardest part on the business side. And then if you think about growing your networks, and we have some networks that started with 12 members, that they got up to 50 when they launched in production, and now over 100. How do you manage just all the new members joining in terms of some of the business agreements and legal agreements as part of that? And then in terms of legacy integration, all of these companies have their existing systems and sources of data that they want to connect and have information flowing back and forth from their blockchain projects. And I think it's interesting to note that for enterprise, the idea of tokens can be quite interesting, both the fungible and non-fungible tokens. A non-fungible token for the insurance industry could be unique vehicle identification number, a license plate. So, representing enterprise assets as digital assets, but using the token construct to align incentives and in some cases encourage really good behavior on the network and how people interact as well. So one example, I'll run through about a half dozen examples of people. This one's in production. So when there's an auto accident, right now you have people entering information on the first notice of loss into a web app, but behind the scenes, there's many systems and multiple steps that the consumers don't see. And all of this really slows down the processing of the claims and introduced a lot of costs for the claims. So putting this on the blockchain, bringing the auto P&C, property and casualty insurers together in the United States so they have one version of the shared truth, really helps make it a lot easier for them to exchange the data, see the same view of the data, to cut the time, cost, and error rates in triggering those claims. The Synaptic Health Alliance is a very large healthcare alliance in the US, and they're tackling the challenge of provider data directories. So, when you have healthcare insurance and you need to find a doctor, you go to your doctor directory and you see who's in my network, who takes my insurance, what's their phone number, what's their address, are they taking new patients? A lot of times this information is out of date or old, and all of these healthcare companies are actually required to keep this data up to date. So they all have separate call centers calling the doctor's office, trying to get the most updated information. And they calculated that this cost them $2.3 billion a year collectively. And this is public data in this case, and it's not a differentiating type of service. It's just table stakes. They need to provide a way for someone who's sick to find a doctor. So they all came together, and this is a solution in production where they're contributing their data, and they're actually using a token incentive model to align the behaviors. So they're able to monetize the data they're contributing. When somebody adds new data or updates, challenges existing data and replaces it with better or newer updated data, they get paid for that. So people's incentives as participants and companies in this network are aligned with the outcome they want, which is the cleaner data. So in this case, it's interesting because there's both the evolution of existing process, so a better way to maintain this directory, but there's also the new business model, which is a way for them to monetize their data and earn some money on top of that, it being actively contributing and maintaining this shared database. And if you think across different industries, so, in the financial services, for example, often in the past, there was a central intermediary. So all of the, members of a business network would have data, they would contribute it to this central clearinghouse, and that central clearinghouse would clean up the data, and then they would have to buy back their own data at 5 to 10 times the cost, or maybe more. So this is a completely decentralized, synaptic. There's no central entity in the middle. These are all individual decentralized participants, but now they're able to create this sort of solution themselves where the value capture for them is kept with the companies who own the data and maintain the data, versus helping enable a third party to build the business on the back of their data. Another example in the insurance space is really became an important one during COVID. There were, in March of last year in New York, that 800 deaths a day, and you have all these families who are impacted because their loved one passed away, but there's no master death record in the United States that all the parties can look at. So how does the family know, did their loved one have an insurance policy? How do they go to the bank, the funeral home, and able to just do all the processing? Today, people have to get 15 copies of the paper documents and stamp all of them. Whereas with this solution on blockchain, now it's all digitized and all the participants see that shared view of the data. So they're able to do what the policyholder envisioned, which was take care of their loved ones and family after they passed away, instead of creating a lot of additional stress and administrative burden and heartache for people. And it also helps the insurance companies. There's regulations about notifying families when the policyholder has passed away. And in some cases, they have multiple policies and they might have an annuity as well as life insurance. So they can't keep collecting insurance premiums and claims after the person has passed away. And they could get large fines if they're found in violation and not notifying people. So this helps them move a lot faster and stay up to date and compliant with regulations. Another use case I like to talk about is in the Philippines, and this one is about bringing financial inclusion to rural communities. So there's about 400 banks in the Philippines who are not on modern payment rails, such as SWIFT. So in the Philippines, it's very common for the woman of the family to go work abroad, maybe in the Middle East or some other countries, as domestic servants. And the remesas familiares, they send back the remittances. They have to pay all these individual fees because they're unbanked. And even if they're working with a local bank in the community, that bank itself is unbanked because they're not on international payment rails. So by jumping over the tracks onto blockchain, they were able to create a new system that for every payment that is sent back to their families, they have a week to 2 weeks of saving of food that they're able to buy just with the savings from that remittance. Covantis is a great example of the agricultural companies coming together, and this is about 80% of the world's grain supply chain, and saying we could do this better if we had the shared view of the data, and coming together as that true industry ecosystem, as I mentioned earlier, that we're seeing this phenomenon happening across the world. Supply chain and track and trace is very popular as a blockchain use case. And we work with diamond mines and gold mines and sustainable tuna is another example I'll talk about. In this case, it's just a very high-end luxury good that they want to make sure is provided authentic, and they can combat, the counterfeit, while also tackling some environmental sustainability issues as well. The NFTs, digital collectibles, and coupons are very popular these days. this particular company 3 years ago already was in production with digital coupons that T-Mobile Tuesday customers would get on their phone, and they'd get $3 off of their supermarket purchase for just entering their phone number and redeeming it. And these consumers didn't even realize blockchain was helping provide the savings. They basically had 500,000 people participated in a matter of hours and downloaded this coupon and had a crypto wallet on their phone and basically using an NFT, a non-fungible token, for that digital coupon. And Kroger, the supermarket, the largest supermarket in the US, was able to give much better coupons because they were able to eliminate a lot of the fraud and waste in the digital ad tech space. A couple other examples I'll go through quickly. That World Bank and IMF have done multiple projects on blockchain. They did start with a Learning Coin token and Learning Coin app as they were looking at central bank digital currencies. CDC looked at tuberculosis and disease surveillance and using blockchain to replace an 18-year-old messaging system between the states and federal government. We have top banks looking at digital securities, creating new asset classes, for example, in real estate. I mentioned the sustainable tuna in the Pacific Cal region, where a third of the world's tuna comes from, and providing that transparency and trust around sustainable tuna. HSBC and the World Wildlife Federation wanted to help meet the UN sustainability goals. So they created a token curated registry that's using blockchain and running on Kaleido to help donors make sure the money is going to the right place, and there's a transparency around that. I already mentioned digital coupons, so it's also bringing in the point of sale, and all you can do to provide customers better offers based on that as well. Tokenization of real estate is a very popular use case worldwide. Climate Warehouse, looking at how blockchain prevents double spending and double counting of carbon credits and other climate assets, so that when countries and companies, entities are paid for the performance, they really are helping improve the environment as a result. And we're really getting the outcomes we need as a society to reduce our carbon emissions and prevent any more damage from global climate change. Education credentialing, and this can be, in this case, it was a consortium of banks and education in that industry, but we've seen that across all industries. And I think the last example here is just digital settlement and intercompany transfers. So financial services just removing many days for the post-trade settlement and moving towards immediate settlement of trades, tokenizing stocks and bonds. And again, this is another production project. This particular one is in Thailand. So it's interesting seeing all the innovation happening worldwide. So if you do come to our Kaleido website, we have lots of case studies for you. I wanted to mention we won a National Science Foundation grant for advanced blockchain research and interoperability. So we're very excited to be bringing those innovations as well. And you'll be hearing more from us on that. And MIT currently is running some courses. A lot of people from Latin America are actually in these courses. It seems pretty popular in Mexico and Brazil, as well as some in Spain and Portugal. So you could check out, there's a lot of great classes you could take. And I did want to thank you for attending the presentation today. We're really excited to be working with all of you. And I encourage you, if you'd like to get started quickly and at no cost, we have a free tier where you can get started and start building things for yourself. So with that, I will conclude my talk and feel free to link into me or reach out through email as well.
Sofía, voy a hablarte en español.
No, sí, está bien.
Voy a hablarte en español. Hoy te presenté en inglés, pero ahora que sé que podemos hablar en español, muchísimas gracias en nombre de toda la organización por tu tiempo, por tu conocimiento, por permitirnos conocer un poco más de todo lo que Kaleido viene realizando como empresa enorme que es a nivel mundial, por el peso que tiene. Y bueno, por supuesto que tu tiempo es muy valioso, así que te agradecemos de corazón.
No, igualmente fue un gran gusto y espero en el futuro que tengamos otras oportunidades de colaborar juntos.
Que así sea, Sofía. Muchísimas gracias. Hasta la próxima.
Gracias.
Sofía López, desde Kaleido, desde Estados Unidos, una empresa, como les decía hoy cuando comenzábamos, bueno, en realidad lo había mencionado en inglés cuando hacía la referencia, pero es una empresa de muchísimo peso en lo que tiene que ver con el blockchain, así que realmente este segmento espero que lo hayan aprovechado porque ha sido de mucho valor. Vamos